Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Caffeinated Librarians. I'm Simona.
I'm Amy.
And in honor of Pride Month, Amy and I will be discussing the Netflix original comedy drama film, The Half of It, which is written and directed by Alice Wu. So The Half of It received the Founders Award for Best Narrative Feature at the 2020 Tribeca Film Festival. The film stars Leah Lewis, Daniel Dimer, Alexis Lemire, and Colin Chu. And just to start off, there will be spoilers. Amy and I will be going into detail, so we just like to make everyone aware of that. So if you haven't watched it, just be aware of it. I'm just going to go over the basic premise of the film. So Ellie Chu, who is the one of the principal characters, lives in the small town of Squamish with her widowed father.
Is that supposed to be, just to interrupt, is that supposed to be Washington? Do we ever know?
I'm honestly not sure. I'm even curious if this is an actual town name, because it seems so like out there. But I'm honestly not sure where it's supposed to be set. I don't know if it's ever mentioned like which state they're in.
Yeah, it seems Washington-y.
It could be. At certain points I was getting Twilight vibes.
Yeah, and just the name Squamish, for some reason, like, was very evocative to me. Oh, Google said Washington.
Thank you, Google.
Lewis, our producer.
So she lives in this small town of Squamish. She lives with her widowed father. And what you learn early on is that she makes money writing essays for her classmates. And she's also assumed responsibility. Her father is a station master, but he is basically no longer doing that work. You learn, and it's pretty obvious that he's in a deep state of depression because of the loss of his wife. So he hasn't been working, and Ellie is writing essays in order to supplement their income and to pay the bills. So one day she's approached by a classmate, Paul Munsky, and he shows her a letter that he's written to his crush, whose name is Astor Flores, and he wants Ellie's help with fixing up the letter and getting together with Astor. Now, initially, Ellie refuses. She doesn't want anything to do with it. And you learn the reason behind is that she is also attracted to Astor, but she quickly changes her mind when she receives a phone call that she and her dad, they're in danger of losing their electricity because they haven't paid the bill. So that's why she accepts. So
Right.
That's like the basic premise of the story. So Amy, if you'd like if you want to just go through your initial thoughts of the film, what you liked.
Okay. I enjoyed all of the characters. I find that generally, at least one of the characters feels like super one-dimensional, and I didn't really get that out of this movie. I felt that everybody was nicely developed, and and the relationship that forms between Ellie and Paul is just the sweetest thing ever. Like Simona said, he just comes to her because he needs this letter written, and he writes the worst letter in the history of mankind that Ellie like sees first and is just basically appalled because she also has a crush on Astor and feels that, in as much as this was a terrible letter in the first place, it was even worse because it was for Astor, because Astor is very deep and like really like a deep and emotionally conflicted person, and Ellie could really see that, and she at the beginning doesn't feel at all that that Paul deserves her. So, and but this is a good way for her to write her feelings. And I also felt like she is closed off. Ellie really does not want anybody close to her. And I think as like an armchair psychologist, I would say it's probably because she lost her mom and her father's super withdrawn. He spends the majority of his time watching old movies and not doing his job, as Simona mentioned. So, the way that Paul kind of comes into her life, and she tries so hard not to let anyone in so that they can't bully her or hurt her, because you're seeing very early on in the movie that she is clearly, if not the only one of the only Asian people like in the town of her age, and she's getting made fun of for her last name. Like, kids drive by and yell "chugga chugga choo choo" as she's on her bike. And she doesn't it's pretty clear she does not want or need anyone from this town, but she's also kind of made her peace with staying in the town forever too, because she can't afford to leave.
Yeah, yes. And yeah, a lot of the points that you brought up were what initially made me really feel for these characters. And also sort of the subversion of expectation, because I forgot that Paul is a football player.
Mm-hmm.
So it subverts that trope of the jock, the arrogant football player. I'm thinking back to the whole football game where he is like so like a sort of lost and waving to Ellie that they almost lose the game. And I was just wondering like how popular he really is, because he's on the football team, but I don't know, that's just something that made me wonder if he shares the same level of popularity as the other football players, because he doesn't seem that
Right.
good at what he does. Um,
Yeah.
but it's a really funny moment, and I did like how the movie is really subverting your expectations, and one could almost say that he subverts Ellie's expectations.
Oh,
Because
definitely.
when she first sees him, she's extremely dismissive because she assumes, oh, he's just like everyone else. What do you want from me?
Exactly. Yeah.
But through their interactions, they both learn so much from one another and they both grow. And it's really beautiful because you don't really see that too often, like beautiful friendships between men and women in our shows.
Yeah.
So I
Definitely.
really, I really appreciated that. So I love Paul's character. I just wanted to hug him every time he was on screen.
I
You
know, me
know,
too.
he's really sweet. One thing I wanted to bring up was I really enjoyed the opening animation sequence
Yes.
in the film when, and this is when Ellie is narrating this Greek myth about the creation of mankind and how at first men were like, we had two arms, two legs, two heads, and we were whole and we were so complete. And the gods became fearful that in finding that completion within ourselves, that we would not give them what was rightfully owed to them. So they split us in half. And I love the whole notion of what a soulmate is, how it's finding that person that completes you, that makes you whole. And
Yeah.
I was having this conversation with my sister that anyone who is fortunate to find their soulmate should feel so blessed because you're finding that person that completes you. And in this film, I assumed that Aster would return Ellie's feelings. That's the part that kind of confused me, whether she too was romantically interested in Ellie or if it was strictly just a friendship. That's the part I was a
Yeah.
little unclear on.
I mean, I think that Aster herself didn't know. Like, I think, if we skip all the way to the end, they after she finds out, she says stuff like, well, I thought about it, and maybe if we were different or if I was different and all that stuff. Um, I don't think she's in any position to know herself or her sexual identity at this point, because there was never anything, it seems, to ask her other than her father's expectations of her. So for her, like at the end, she's applying for art school, and I think that means that she really, she is taking the opportunity to leave versus staying in town, marrying the boy that her dad liked, even though he's like a jerk, and then she can discover what she is. Because like at this point, if the movie had ended with them getting together, the dad would have probably disowned her. She would have been like 17 or 18 years old, trying to find like a place to live. It would have been this complete imbalance of power between them, and it never would have worked out. So, there's no way that I think they could have had a happy ending, even if they had like that riding off into the sunset.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would have been um kind of a tragic ending, actually, because you would just be like, how's this gonna work? And I felt like, to the other half, the title, or right, is it called The Other Half? Or I can never remember this title.
The half of it.
The half of it. Thank you. I have massacred this title all week. I cannot remember what it's called. But the half of it is alluding to that other half of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it really brings into focus that I don't think Aster was the other half. I think Paul was. Like, does it have to be a sexual relationship?
That's a good point. I was sort of not thrown off, but surprised by the revelation that Paul developed feelings for Ellie.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of took me off guard. But I was happy. I mean, obviously, with Aster being not Aster, I'm sorry, with Ellie being sexually attracted to girls, there wouldn't have been any possibility of a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting that they had that reveal where he kisses her, and Ellie is so shocked. But what I do love is that they have this beautiful relationship, which is based on love, which is based on trust, which is based on them really seeing the other for who he or she is.
Right.
And I'm thinking back to that moment where it's Paul has found out that Ellie is a lesbian, and it's that heartbreaking moment when he says, "Oh my God, you're going to hell."
Right.
I'm thinking back on it, I don't think it was a judgment. I think it's a fear on his part
I
because
do too. I never thought it was like it's funny because I was watching this with my husband, and that's kind of how he took it as well. He was like, "Well, that's nice," and I said, I think that he doesn't know how else to think of it. He has no concept of people not going to hell for being gay because that's all he's ever been taught. And I thought that it was also really nice that that whole scene kind of made me feel like it had to be there, even though like they're never going to be together because that's impossible. But I don't think that most boys or people in general believe that people can be friends and not be in love if they're of opposite sexes. So for her to not be attracted to men, she wasn't going to be in that situation, but he couldn't really think of her as anything other. Like, oh my God, I love this girl. Well, then I have to love her sexually. like if you're heterosexual and our I think it's definitely our society. I don't know if it's worldwide, but and like from when Harry met Sally, like men and women can't be friends. That solid flat statement, because if you love someone and they're the gender that your preference is,
Hmm.
can you not like interlace those things just because that's what generally you do?
Yeah, and I think it might be also cross-cultural, because I've seen other like films or dramas where it's two friends of the opposite gender and one of them has a crush, the other one doesn't reciprocate, but at the end, like the person with the crush comes to terms with it and then like their friendship continues. But I definitely do think there is that notion, as you just said, that a man and a woman can't possibly be friends without one feeling some form of sexual attraction to the other.
Right.
Obviously, it's not the case, but I do think that's sort of the prevalent thought, and you see it a lot in our dramas. I was even
Right.
thinking about, I just Buffy popped into my mind because of Xander and Willow,
Right.
where it's obvious from the first episode that Willow is deeply attracted to Xander. He doesn't really reciprocate until like they do that weirdness in season 3, but once again that notion that one of them has to like the other, because
Yeah.
why else would they be friends?
Right.
But
Right. That's the only part of a friendship that someone can focus on. And I mean, I swear that it's usually more the girl that happens to. And I feel like it's probably because, like I mean, I know that men have like the friend zone problem, but
mhm.
I also, only having been a girl, I know that like, the minute you're friends with a boy, like, oh, that's your boyfriend. And I don't know if that's the same with both genders, like how immediate and like automatic that putting these labels of love and getting married and is your boyfriend and all that stuff kind of plays into it.
Yeah, I honestly can't speak for guys. Maybe our producer Lewis can chime in at a certain point. But yeah, you definitely see it a lot. But one of the things, like I said, I appreciate is that their love, their acceptance of one another comes from a
Hmm.
place of friendship. And another truly touching moment, at least it was for me, is when Ellie is trying to find her outfit for the recital, and
Aww.
she's just tossing on anything. And Paul looks at her and goes, "You're gonna go with that?" And like everything was like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Let me help you." And she says, "Well, what would you know?" And he says, "I have sisters,"
Right.
which also is another clue to how he is as a person. Because even among siblings, there's this notion, well, there's the sister sphere and the brother sphere, and the two shouldn't
Hmm.
meet. I don't know about what you do, and you don't know about what I do.
Right.
And he comes from a very large family. And the fact that he says, I have sisters, so I can help you. And the fact that he's chosen her outfit, but the outfit that he's chosen for her, the final outfit that you see her wear, it's in line with her personality.
Yes.
It's like, it's not something where you would say, oh, this character would never wear that.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
and I mean, one would assume probably there may have been some hits or misses, but the way I saw it was that he's in tune with her as a person. So he was
Yeah.
able to select an outfit that flatters her because for the most part, she hides in her clothing. When
Yeah.
you see that outfit, it flatters her, but it's still her style.
Right. I
So
agree.
I love that moment. I smiled watching that scene because it's truly so sweet,
Yeah.
and they just have such a wonderful relationship.
Yeah. And that actually, like, that part made me smile. But I just love, like, throughout them, trying to woo Aster together.
Mhm.
And they're meeting in Aster's father's church, because like it seems like there are only like three places in town. There's the school, the church, the station, the train station where Ellie lives, and the school and this one store. Um, but throughout the relationship, like, Paul is always running. Like, you can, like, at the very beginning, the first time you see Paul is when he's running past Ellie and Aster's classroom where they're doing band and chorus, and he's running with the team, and he kind of stops to listen. And I really like, from that very part, it seems like he's got a more well-rounded personality than any of the quote unquote jocks. They're really tuning into all of the sides of his personality that he knows. I want to think that he just liked the music, that he didn't even know Aster and Ellie were in there. And then the next time you see him, he's running after Ellie on her bicycle, and he's always running after Ellie on her bicycle so that they can talk, because she goes back and forth to school on her bicycle. He just runs. He just runs after her, and you see him getting faster and faster, which was awesome. And I kind of thought that was a really nice visual for how in so many occasions they're just watching out for each other. And at first it's just Paul watching out for Ellie. Like, he's just taken her on, and like he's trying so hard to, like, help her, help him. And I think it's just natural for him to take care of people, because he comes from a big family. And he says he wants to make sausages because his mom makes sausages, and they were his mom's recipe. And he says at one point, like, and it was like this disclosure war. Like, she's getting out of the car, and he says, I want to make my own sausage recipe. So she's getting out of the car, and he, like, races to tell her something so she'll stay. And he says, my mom wants to make her mom's sausages, but I want to make new sausages. And if she can't have her mom, she at least still has her sausages, and it's either her heart or mine.
Yeah, that's very that I loved that. There were so many moments I loved.
I know.
Particularly, I love the moments between Paul and Ellie more so than any other interactions.
Yeah,
But
anything with Aster was just kind of like, eh, let's get back to Paul and Ellie.
yeah, so like in fact, I had this, I don't know if it's a radical thought that it probably goes back to what you said earlier, that the true love story in this film is between Ellie and Paul. Um,
Mhm.
and what I loved is that even though they're from different cultures, they're able to find similarities because both of them are dealing with the expectations of their families. Both of them have become lost to a certain extent because Paul, in the sheer size of his family, where he is literally sort of lost, Ellie more figuratively because her father is going through this deep depression. They don't really interact with one another. But I do love how food is sort of
Yeah,
what
I
brings
was
them
thinking
together
that.
because like when Paul invites Ellie to his home, and I love that moment where they're in the background and they're just watching like the food wars that are occurring, and Paul goes, so I guess it's your house then.
Right.
And then you see where he is seated on the floor, there's Ellie and her father, and they're watching a movie, and I just love the actor's name. I think I forgot to mention him earlier, Colin
Colin.
Cho or Chu. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that.
I
Um,
unfortunately don't remember his last name.
It's spelled Chou, but I'm not sure if it's Cho or
Right.
Chu. So forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it. Where he's giving Ellie a side eye, like, who is this man? Because for the longest time it's just been the two of them, but you can see that there's that presence now, and he's almost like subtly acknowledging, like, who is this person? And another beautiful moment, and it sort of goes back to food, is first of all, Paul and her father connect through making food.
Right.
There's a funny moment where Ellie's father is like pounding the meat. And at one point he's just pounding it and
I thought that
pounding
was
it.
dumpling dough.
It's probably dumpling dough, probably. You're probably right. But I like how he's looking at Paul, and Paul is basically mimicking him, like he's also pounding it. And that's how they're communicating. They're pounding the dough. And so they make food together. And he tells Ellie, he made such wonderful dumplings. And just how that's how Paul sort of breaks through with the father. It's through food, and the father slowly starts to come alive. And another moment that I really loved was, this is after Paul has learned that Ellie is gay, and he's delivered some food to Ellie's father, and the father realizes there's something wrong. And Paul has this moment where he tells the father that you think you think you know her potential, but you really don't.
Yeah.
And, and basically that it's probably his subtle way of telling the father that she isn't reaching her potential because she's worried about you, and you need to snap out of it. And that's when the father actually does sort of snap out of it, and he comes alive to an extent, and then he resumes his train master duties. But I really love
Right.
how, in addition to that, Paul and Ellie are brought together through film and literature, what also connects them is food.
Mm-hmm.
So
Definitely.
I loved those moments too, because cross culturally, what connects people is food. Food is what brings us together. So I really love that moment. But I want to go back. You mentioned how you really thought all the characters were sort of fleshed out. I had the opposite response to the characters, some of them
Mhm.
at least. Like with Trig,
Oh, Trig doesn't count.
he's, but it's so funny because
I think
as it was,
Trig, that is fully fleshed out Trig.
I mean, granted, there are people that are, I guess, one dimensional. Maybe there really are people that are like that, where they're really surface level. But I kind of thought that he was a walking caricature, and maybe that was the point of the film.
Well, my view, oh, go on.
I was also thinking about, I was going back to Winona Earp, and every time I saw Trig, I saw Waverly's boyfriend,
Yeah.
whose name now like Champ.
Champ, yes.
I kept on thinking this is Champ 2.0. I mean, he was hysterical in the fact that all he can see is himself.
Right.
But I don't know. I kind of would wish there would be a little bit more to him, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, I saw it as, he doesn't let's I think we have to go back to the beginning a little bit
Hmm.
to for me to answer that. Paul, like, his outward appearance has no depth,
Hmm.
because like he writes his initial letter to Aster before Ellie gets involved is he never sends it because he gives it to Ellie and she just says no.
Hmm.
Is so one dimensional, and I don't know if that's basically what people get of us generally. Like, is that necessarily one dimensional view of people? But Trig had no interest in learning anything about anybody else. Like, if Trig was in love with Aster, he would not. I mean, first of all, I don't know how deep he can love at this age because he's totally into himself. He's never wanted anything ever. And he's used to people being adoring towards him because he's rich and he's handsome. So, has he developed any depth? Possibly not. And he doesn't care. Like if Aster said, I don't want to be with you, he would be sad, but it would probably only really be because she said no to him.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, there definitely are people where they are very much self-involved. But I guess I kind of saw it like even with Aster, there were at points where I felt like she just existed to be sort of the muse for Paul and Ellie, like just almost maybe that's the wrong word, but that sometimes she didn't have much of a personality. I mean, later on, when Ellie actually interacts with her, which is also probably the point of the film, she definitely gets more fleshed out. She seems more real to me. Like when they have that moment where they go to that hot spring
Right.
and they're both talking to one another, she definitely then feels fleshed out. And you definitely get that she is a girl who's struggling under the weight of expectation, both from her
Right.
father and from her, I'm just going to call them the mean girls. I, I love that moment where they hand her the scarf and
Yes.
one of the girls says, "This would look so nice on you." And I love that when
Right.
she was like, "You mean right now?" She was like,
Yeah.
"Yes." And you see that they're all wearing the same skirt, the same scarf.
Hmm.
I actually laughed when I watched that. It was just
Yeah.
so funny.
I also noticed like the rest of them were blonde, and I think
Yes,
that was definitely a statement. But that's exactly where I was gonna go, like with her being one dimensional. Again, I don't think that she had any challenges that she was willing to make character growth happen. She didn't necessarily want to be like everybody else, but by taking the scarf, she accepted that role, just like she accepted the role of being Trig's girlfriend. And it was clear that her father liked him. And, she wasn't going to go against him. They, once Paul and Aster had some sort of relationship, it was secret because she didn't have the nerve to stand up to anybody.
true. Which is also, it's very common in high school that that's often a reality. You succumb to peer pressure, parental pressure. But I was just looking at an article and it says the half of it ending ignores the movie's huge cheating problem, and it talks about there's a heading, Aster is a really bad girlfriend. So the article basically goes on to say that she repeatedly demonstrates her lack of commitment to him. When she receives her first love letter from Paul Ellie, she keeps it secret from him. The
Hmm.
letters and texts with Paul quickly become intimate, which is a form of emotional infidelity.
Yeah, definitely.
Aster's relationship with Paul then crosses a line when she sets up their first date. Although she specifies they are only friends, it isn't out of loyalty to Trig. Rather, it's because the date turned awkward when the real-life Paul fails to live up to his ghost-ridden letters. Which I get that, there's an
Yeah,
obvious
definitely.
disconnect. Eventually, the relationship with Paul turns romantic, yet she continues to date Trig. Her relationship with Trig is clearly serious, and I don't really agree with that part. He even
Nope.
proposes to
Well, I
her.
mean, he wants, like, his dad owns half the town. He's clearly not going anywhere. He just wants, probably with parental expectation as well. He just wants, to bring on the next level of monarchy. I can't, like they're obviously superstars in the town. And again, like, let's discuss how pain brings on emotional growth. Ellie's a grown up, like, early on, and her dad talks to Paul about this, that, like, after her mom died, the dad just kind of was unable to do anything, just kind of shut down. And then one morning he woke up and he realized that Ellie was doing the track switching. Like Ellie had taken over his job because she had to. And, and Paul, he's like in the middle of however many kids. And, he knows he wants to do something else. And he's really conflicted about, am I going to hurt my mom? Am I going to hurt my mom, or am I going to, just be the next member of the family that does the same thing as everybody else? So they have more outlet for growth.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm sorry, I'm just continuing the article. And it goes on to say, the writer says, in the treatment of the Astor-Ellie relationship, the half of it points out a double standard many queer teens face. Paul, who is on the football team with Trig, has no qualms about romantically pursuing his teammate's girlfriend behind his back.
Mm-hmm.
However, when he discovers that she is in love with Astor, his initial reaction is to shame her by calling it a sin, which we discussed earlier. I don't think
I
that's what
don't
he was
agree
doing.
with that.
Yeah, I don't think he was shaming her. Cheating is treated as perfectly acceptable. Queerness is not, which again, I think that's reading into it. It is through this that Netflix, the half of it, gets a truth queer teens growing up in religious environments regularly have to face. Yet it does so by ignoring the unfaithful acts of its core cast, implicitly condoning this behavior.
I don't
Now,
know. I mean, I didn't find it as condoning so much as, like showing it. No, she doesn't seem like she's not showing outward conflict, but you see when she texts him that she'll go out with him, it's as she's watching this. I don't know if there's much there to plumb the depths of, but Trig is like out mudding with his buddies, and he's like, babe, did you get that? And he's definitely not showing that he cares, that she's clearly not into this. Like, she either didn't get an opinion on whether or not she could come, or she didn't see it as she did.
yeah, I mean, definitely what you're able to gather from their interactions is that there really is no emotional connection, no emotional investment from either party.
Right.
While I can see where the writer is saying, because yes, Astor and Trig are in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, if you feel that your relationship is going nowhere, end it politely, amicably, if possible, but don't go behind the person's back and sort of have this secret emotional relationship with someone else. I understand what the writer is saying. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that the movie was condoning it in any
Right.
way. And I don't think that, once again with Paul, that Paul was shaming Ellie for being gay. I just thought of it as that this is a girl that he loves, he cares about, and she's gay. And his church has taught him, well, if you're
Right.
gay, your only course of action is to go to hell. So
Mm-hmm.
I read it as fear and concern, because there's that beautiful moment where you see that he's looking up information on being gay,
Oh man, that was
which causes,
awesome.
and I don't mean comical in a flippant way, but his mother sees it, and I was like, oh my God, now she's gonna think her son is gay. What is she going to say?
Right.
But he has
And
this moment in church where he doesn't even out Ellie, which I thought was so beautiful, because at first I thought he was going to out her unintentionally. But he
mm-hmm.
says, there's nothing wrong with being who you are. There's nothing wrong with loving who you love. Love is
Right.
not wrong. Because he jumps off when he quotes the psalm, love is patient, love is kind.
Right.
And Paul jumps off of that and he says, you're right. Love doesn't judge.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks to Ellie, and it's such a beautiful moment because he isn't outing her, but he's telling her, I accept you. You're not wrong.
Right.
Of course, his mom reads it as and she says, there's nothing wrong. I love you, even if you're gay. He says, I'm not gay. He says, oh, thank God, but I want to change your recipe. She's like, are you crazy? And it's just like the movie does a good mixture of the humor and the pathos of life. I think it does it very well. But it was another
Mm-hmm.
beautiful moment, which I guess proves to me that Paul wasn't shaming Ellie for being gay. I see it, as I said before, he was fearful and concerned for her. So he does his dutiful research, I'm assuming, and he basically comes to the conclusion that there's nothing wrong with her feelings and that he
Yeah.
shows her, I love you and I accept you. So Paul, I just want to hug him. He's such a beautiful character and it's such a beautiful moment. And of course, Ellie jumping on that as well to make her own statement. And this time she's addressing Aster and she mentions make bold strokes, or
Right.
is what you're doing the boldest stroke that you can possibly make? So is it perfect? I don't think it's a perfect film,
Right.
but I still think it has a lot of emotional weight. It's addressing important issues, and I think it does a good job. It's a good movie.
Mm-hmm. And and just like at the end, like and earlier at the beginning of the movie, the teacher, one like her favorite teacher, clearly gives her a college application that kind of somewhere in the middle she fills out, and then she apparently gets accepted, but you don't see that happening. And I think that the dad probably got that because she didn't react to it. Um, but he takes Paul's thoughts on that to heart, and and basically just presents her with like 6 hours worth of dumplings for the train ride.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And and really just saying, I didn't bring you here so that you could be like me. And that's really really accepting and encouraging her to grow, even though that means that he has to take more on, and not just relax in the safety of her getting things done, which was nice. And then just the when I cried, the end the end of the movie, when they're saying goodbye at the train station, and earlier they were watching an old movie together, and the like a woman is on the train and the man is like talking to her, and he's trying like and he's running after her while the train is moving, and she's crying, and Paul thinks it's sweet, and she just thinks both of them are idiots, because like who would do that, like who would take such an emotional risk to run. They can't outrun the train. There's no reason to do that. And if she's crying, she's just a moron too. And then at the end of the movie, he's running, which he's been doing the whole movie, and he's been gaining speed the whole movie, and he's running by the train waving at her, and she's laughing and crying. And I thought it brought it full circle, which was really nicely done for me.
Yeah, that was definitely a touching scene. I think it's also for me, um, friendships, beautiful friendships in films always get to me in a way that I think other relationships don't necessarily affect me in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And that parting scene where she's going off to college, the assumption is that he is also going to be pursuing his dream because he mentions something to her. Aster is taking
Mm-hmm.
that extra step. She's, handing in portfolios. And it is a very beautiful moment, and it is very touching because the fact that she is moving on, they probably won't see each other for a little while. So that also struck a chord with me as well. And I love when she's looking around at the various people in the train compartment, and then she looks at the audience and she slowly starts to smile.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I see it as that while she was in Squamish, she couldn't wait to leave Squamish. Now she's realizing it, but a part of her, I think, is fearing the step into the unknown.
Definitely.
So I think that the actress did a phenomenal job in capturing that uncertainty, that fear, but then that final realization, I'm going to be okay, and she smiles,
Right.
and that's how the film ends. So
And I
yeah.
think, oh, sorry. I think that also that moment was, um, she never really had anything to stay for. She had to take care of her dad. That was an obligation. And she was going to get a full ride scholarship to the community college. So that was monetary. But she had no friends that she was going to leave behind. So finally, she's leaving this town she's always hated, and there's a reason to grieve, which is also a good thing that finally she has like a good friend that she can rely on.
True, and I guess one could argue there could always be that possibility of she and Aster, if Aster reciprocates the feelings, potentially having a relationship. It's sort of left up in the air.
Yeah.
But overall, I'm happy that each of them is able to acknowledge themselves, to accept themselves, and to sort of pursue their own dreams. And they do it by virtue of being the strength that they both need. Like Paul and Ellie, they need each other. As you
Yeah.
mentioned, they're like the two halves of the same soul that needed to come together to be completed. So yeah, it's a really beautiful film. I would definitely recommend that you watch this film.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I guess that's how I'll conclude the podcast, by saying definitely check it out. It's a Netflix original. The director, Alice Wu, she's written another film that I watched years ago called Saving Face, and it's another queer story with Asian characters. I don't know if it's semi-autobiographical. I thought I read that this film, the half of it is semi-autobiographical, but it's really definitely worth the watch.
Yes, agreed.
So thank you again for joining us. Thank you as always for listening. And I wish that you have a wonderful day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and join us next time.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.